please do bear with us. Our session for this afternoon deals with politics. And at this time, we have two very venerable speakers who will be presenting. And I will introduce you firstly to Dr. Kirtie Algoe. And she is going to speak about elections 2020 in Suriname and political power struggles, a Gramscian approach. Now, a little bit about Dr. Algoe. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's degree in development and policy, and a PhD degree in social sciences. She's a researcher at the Institute of Graduate Studies and Research of the Anton de Kom University of Suriname. Now she works on qualitative methodology, gender, and sports. She combines academic work with sports. She practices martial arts, and for over 18 years is an active board member of the Suriname Olympics. So Dr. Algoe, you were initially carded for 12 minutes, given that we may have, you're allowed 15. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Bindhu, for the wonderful introduction. Okay, we have to continue from where we stopped the previous session. Allow me to share my screen. This is here. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes,
okay.
We are seeing it. I don't know if you want to put it on full screen. Right, lovely.
It's a full screen.
Right.
Okay, I'll make sure I stay within my time limit. What I'm going to do is present you something about the elections in Suriname, which were held in 2020. And the presentation is part of an ongoing research. Bits of the results have been presented on previous platforms. For instance, last year during the second virtual conference of the GIHR, I talked about the role of social media. We also have some initiatives to do comparative analysis about the elections in Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad. But what I'm going to talk today is more about the ideological control during elections. Elections is about gaining power, trying to obtain political power, influence people's mind, their decisions, their preferences. And to do that, I used various methods. Basically, I used the case study design, in which the elections are treated as a case. And I use multiple methods with students and colleagues. We work on databases of online Facebook pages, and we make databases of newspapers. And based on those databases, we try to make some quantitative analysis. But we also look at speeches by political leaders. Now, let me give you a brief overview of the elections we had so far. Up to now, we had 17 since the general suffrage, and like in various multi-ethnic countries, we also have a history of political power struggles along ethnic lines. Our pioneering political parties were based on an ethnic affiliation, and so we could say mono-ethnic political parties. But since the early 20s, we could say there is a shift to more multi-ethnic parties. And what you see is that the traditional political parties are trying to incorporate the multi-ethnic faith of the political party. So what was interesting during the elections of 2020 is that one of the traditional party VHP, it was traditionally an East Indian party. In the beginning, even a Hindu party, meaning a religious, religion-based party. So the VHP transformed itself a little bit, claiming to be multi-ethnic. And then we had other more or less traditional parties. One is ABOP. ABOP is predominantly representing Maroons. And then we have the NPS. NPS has a strong affiliation to mixed people, Creole. And then we have the more or less Javanese political party, which is we call Percaya Luhur PL. So in 2020, these four parties made the coalition. Let me give you a picture of the parties who were part of the elections. In the opposition, we had the VHP, we had the NPS, and the ruling party was NDP, the National Democratic Party, led by Bouterse. And then we had other traditional parties. What is interesting is we had a lot of new parties. Some of them are led by persons who were previously activists and tried to oppose the ruling party. And let me now go to what I'm actually trying to say today, which is the political power struggles between the two major parties. I'm going to focus on the ruling party at that time, which was the NDP, and the major opposition, the major party in the opposition, which is the VHP. We know that in 2020, we had worldwide a challenge, which was the pandemic. And the pandemic didn't only challenge our health context, it also challenged the way we entered the political arena. What was previously accepted was no longer possible. Traditional political campaigning, face-to-face campaigning, getting mass gatherings were no longer an option due to the pandemic. So what you got is you got non-traditional political campaigning during using online platforms. In our situation, Suriname was challenged. Except for the pandemic, we had the economic crisis. We had a number of corruption scandals, of which maybe the major one included ministers and even the governor of the central bank. So we had a turbulent situation in the country, and you can imagine how this affected our political climate. It was severe, and against this backdrop, I use the Gramscian concept to analyze how political parties try to influence the mind of the people. Now, let me give you a little bit about the political about the theoretical background. So Gramsci comes from the Marxist group. He uses a concept which is called hegemony. Hegemony refers to the way ruling groups try to win the support by using various strategies. So they look at creating consent by making alliances, bargains, or pacts with subordinate groups, or even people who try to threaten their status. Another thing is they try to produce what we call popularly common sense. What is common sense? Common sense is the internalization, it's the naturalization of prevailing beliefs, giving them a status which can be seen as on earth, not totally true, but it is normal. So by producing common sense, subordinate groups are actually kept under an ideological control, and the status quo is actually nice. It's okay. You don't need to challenge it. You don't need to change it. And there are various ways to do that. You can, for instance, you can work on education, you can work on architecture, you can produce the same message over and over again on multiple forums, and you try to convince people who do not want to buy your ideas. And another thing for doing that is using the right way of leading. So leadership is a crucial instrument in creating ideological control. I will not be able to explain all these things in depth, but this is just to give you an idea of how people try to create ideological control in a situation of power. What I did in my study, I combined the Gramscian approach with e-politics. And e-politics was necessary to understand the role of social media in an era where digital communication plays a key role. And studies show that actually these platforms are important for various reasons, but three of them are, you have to convey messages about the position of the party or the person. You promote personalities, you promote trustworthiness, and to try to improve your name. So what I did, I looked at how social media was used. And one of the things was what type of messages did they actually convey? Now, to the result. What we found is that NDP tried to remain in power by using various themes of political campaigning, but the major one is what we call in our lingua franca is social lobby. Social lobby means only love. And it was a very simple, catchy word promoted on social media. And please keep in mind there were at least 24 NDP related Facebook pages. The social lobby message was also conveyed through traditional media programs. This political party has its own TV, and they also used the government TV as they were in power. What was interesting was their influence through radio programs. Their media chef, the president had or the government had a media chef who was openly aligned to the NDP, and he had a program which is very popular in Suriname. It's called Bakanatori, and Bakanatori, it means afternoon chat. So what you got during the elections is that the media chef discussed in a very simple, open, and non-abstract way various issues like economic crisis, problems related to the politics, even the pandemic. During the programs, what was striking is that he made sure that the problems related to the economy or corruption were not linked to the integrity or to the image of the leader. So they made sure that the leadership of the NDP was not questioned, and that is a way to gain ideological control of the people, in particular when so many people are listening to the program. Another thing is that they use populist measures such as food packages for the poor, again distributed through the infrastructure of the government. And they also had allies with entrepreneurs and religious groups, very influential religious groups in our country. Remember, I said that one of the ways to create ideological control is to include those who try to threaten your status. And during before the elections, we had strong opposition by small groups, especially young people, and they call themselves activists. So what the IDP tried to do is include them in the political party. It didn't succeed at all levels, but that's just a way to tell you how they move. And what did they do? As I said before, they make sure that through their propaganda machine, the leader of the leader of the NDP was not questioned with respect to his character. Critics called this way of coping the anomie syndrome, which means it's not my fault. So another thing was that during the programs, the political campaigning and the programs of radio and television, this party repeatedly blamed imperialists and foreigners for the local economic problems. And they made sure that these messages, these responses were broadcasted on all the platforms. Now, what did actually the VHP do? The VHP was the major opposition. It had a long period of preparation for the elections. They included, as I said, it was a traditional East Indian party, but up to the elections, they made sure that they had some other ethnic groups in highly visible positions to make sure that the party has a multi-ethnic outlook. They also had the face-to-face campaigning called Meet the People, and what was what was influential was the slogan "What's sitting," meaning we will make it better, we will solve it. And as I said, "What's sitting" was a catchy thing to solve the huge, to promise solutions for the economic crisis we had at that time. They had a very strong online campaigning, 28 Facebook pages totally. They also had a strong media propaganda. They had an own television, but I think personally, what was significant in for the success was they created allies with the activist group. It was an activist group called Young Generation, and they promoted smart voting. Smart voting referring to voting on a major opposition party. So vote on anything big except for the NDP. And that message was repeated at many platforms. Now, this is a picture showing the Facebook pages, and but yeah, this is a comparison of the teams during the political campaigning. As you see, NDP social lobby, it focused on infrastructure projects, ethnic diversity, decolonization, populist measures, and the VHP focused on recovery of economy, zero corruption, change. I can discuss all of them, but we don't have that time, so I will sum up to. I will move on to the Gramscian reflection. As I said before, the propaganda mechanisms of NDP made sure that they do not question the NDP leadership. Okay, and that was quite effective through the program, the radio program Bakanatori. And they tried to create allies, in particular with civil society groups that challenged the government. The VHP, we could call it the counter-hegemonic measures. They focused on anti-corruption, and they also created allies with other groups. What was striking, and this is going to be my final part, is that both parties focused on cultural diversity. By design, promoting cultural diversity in a positive way. However, the political framing of ethnicity expressed more negative inter-ethnic relations on social media, which is quite a paradox. Okay, so we could have stereotype dating from the 1970s. You could ask yourself, what is happening in society right now? Virtual campaigning actually brought a negative effect on our intercultural relations than non-virtual campaigning. So my final thought is that any political power struggles, the questioning of leadership was actually out of question. It's a both parties. we saw that ethnicity was the most misused element, and we could raise questions about the democratic practices within both parties. Something I'm still pondering on is how do we deal with ethnic representation versus competencies, integrity within both parties. So that's those are my final thoughts. I look forward to your questions, Bindhu. A lot of time now.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirtie Algoe. You've given us a very good redirection given our previous, the information we were, privy to before. So politics, ethnicity, and all of this is really something very pertinent and poignant in our space. And I'm sure we're going to have lots and lots of questions that will follow. So you stay right here until all presentations are done, and then we will move on to the question and answer segment. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we move on to our second presenter, and it is Ms. Marina Debris. A little bit about what Ms. Debris is going to be speaking about. She's going to talk about women's participation in local governance in Suriname, a review. Now, a little bit about Ms. Debris. She is a sociologist and lecturer and a former part-time researcher at the Institute for Women, Gender and Development Studies at the Anton Decom University of Suriname. She's currently working on her PhD project, very, very beautiful topic, the social construction of sexuality and gender in a Surinamese Javanese settings. And Ms. Debris' current research area is focused on gender and sexuality. She has other interests in gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health, Afro-Surinamese cultural and spiritual concepts. Ms. Marina Debris, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
No problem.
Can I share my screen? Yes, thank you.
Do you have permission to share? Are you seeing that?
Everyone has permission to share.
Great, we're seeing it.
It's already visible? Okay, thank you.
The first slide is now showing.
Okay. Yes, you've already mentioned, I will talk about women's participation in local governments in Suriname. So it's a review. I will go directly to my area of concern. The main concern is that in spite of, we see a relative increase of women on several government levels. Nevertheless, we see that women have marginal involvement in national decision-making. So we've searched the Global Gender Gap Index, and Suriname scores 0.25, a gender disparity for political empowerment. Suriname was among the 56 among 155 countries, the 56 in 2021. And in Suriname, women account for half of the population. So what's very interesting is that national data of Suriname show that a lot of achievement of women, among other things, especially in education. But at the same time, with a lot of respect to all the women already in politics, there are still persistent inequalities in politics. So that's the main area of concern. So the aim was to analyze data, diverse data, statistical, et cetera, and to show trends on women's participation and also representation on local governance level. So we did a desk research using a gender perspective, but also a feminist perspective. And the focus was on 2005 till 2015 because of the availability of statistics, sex disaggregated or gender disaggregated data on participation. So it was important to me to show some data and trends on the level of participation of women in local governance representative body in Suriname. So it is limited only to these representative bodies. I will some insights on local governance. So we have district and sub-levels, and the district council, which we call in Dutch districtsraden, they form the representative branch, and the district administrators in Dutch districtbesturen, they are the executive branch. But it is important to note that district councils are responsible for lawmaking and formulating regulations for districts on districts level. But these regulations must be in accordance with the national law or the constitution. If not, the National Assembly can repeal these regulations. So, and there's another level, a sub-district level, and these consist of resortraden, we say in Dutch, or resource council, and their main responsibility is to advise the district governments on matters on their level, sub-district. So Suriname has in total 10 districts council and 62 resort councils. So I want to give you a small overview of relevant research. It is already known that since 1984, all women and men over the age of 18 are allowed to actively participate in the elections. But as I've mentioned before, the main concern is that although we see an active participation or an increase in women's participation in political organs since 1996, the number still remains small, even though there are no discriminatory articles that would exclude women to participate in these political positions. And there is also a decree political organizations which allows women and everyone, irrespective of race and religious conviction, that the political parties are open to anyone. So I'd like to also give you an insight on the opportunities. This is only a few. I've listed a few of the opportunities in leadership and decision making regarding women. So in the past few years, some efforts were made to increase the number. There was a round-table discussion in 2012 held by the National Assembly of Suriname. There was a project, More Women in Decision Making, 2015, also carried out by the National Assembly. And ook zij, we say in Dutch, also she, or a campaign, and the special aim was to increase public awareness on equal participation of women and men. And NGO's like Stichting Projecten and Vrouwenparlement Forum, in English Women Parliament Forum, they also had activities which included raising awareness of women's participation in politics. So the Vrouwenparlement Forum, they implemented a campaign in 2005, which was repeated in 2015. And we have Stichting Projecten. Every month they organize, or in the month, they have a special democracy month, which elaborates on participation or zooms in on participation, democracy, and gender since 2009. On the other hand, I would also give you some insights on barriers for women in decision making. There are multiple factors, and these factors include lack of opportunities within political parties, a lack of suitable and sufficient childcare, and sometimes relatively weak financial position of women compared to men, and very important, a lack of access to political and financial network to support a political campaign, and sometimes lack of support from their own environment. We should also look at the preparing and passing of legislation on women's rights and equality. It has been fragmented, and we still have to look carefully at the passing and the interpretation of laws, because they tend to be based on traditional gender roles, religion sometimes, ideology, among other things. Some statistics, I think this is very interesting to look at. District commissioners are appointed by the president, but still we can see that there is underrepresentation of female district commissioners since 1996. And this means that the level of women in this particular position is still very, very small. And this district commissioners, as I have mentioned before, they are busy with formulating law regulations for a district. Let's have a look at the total number of district council by sex. And this is positive. We can see an increase, although it's small, but it's still an increase from 24% to 34.7% in 2015. Local council, we can also see an increase. It's a slight increase, but it's still an increase. And it exceeds the critical mass goal endorsed by the Beijing Platform for Action. It applies to women in parliament, but I applied it here to local council. Another interesting fact is that if we look at total number of members by district council, we can see a significant increase in Brokopondo and Paramaribo. But if we look at districts like Nikeri and Koroni, there is a gender gap. And we are still looking into this gender gap. So what we see is, despite that the relative increase of women in local government, women are still marginally involved in national decision making. And women remain a statistical minority, especially as we look at district commissioners. And there is also a substantial difference between female representation in local council in Nikeri, Brokopondo, and Paramaribo. So it's very interesting to investigate further on these substantial differences. So I have some questions which I would like to investigate further in other research or in further research. Is the participation and representation of women in Suriname still linked to traditional gender roles? Are women not expected to cope with male dominance in in decision making or in governance, and how are women's voices and experiences represented in decision making that affects them. And I still wonder why women are still underrepresented as district commissioners are appointed. Other questions: how can we help empower women and men to participate more equally in decision making? And most importantly, I would still like to know, investigate further if decision making and political power are still seen as masculine by women and men, or maybe political parties. And do we have to look at do we have to zoom in on the interpretations of laws of women's rights and equality? Do we need a redefinition? And how can we deal with, or how can issues of men or women and women be incorporated without undermining the struggle for women to participate? So I would like to thank you. Grantangi, we say in Sranantongo. Thank you.
And how do you say you're welcome? So I can say that.
You're welcome. Abung, we can say abung sometimes.
All right. Well, abung, right? Lovely having you.
I like
Lovely
it.
having
Yes,
you
I will
here.
stop sharing if it's okay.
Yes, you can. You can.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Marina Davies. And you brought up something that is so relevant and very, very prevalent. And I am sure that we have questions. I will recommend that everyone who has a question to go in the reaction button at the bottom of the screen and click on the raise hand so I can see you and take your questions accordingly. Now we have our final presentation right now, and it comes from Ms. Ingrid Griffith, and she has a pre-recorded presentation on Shirley Chisholm. Now, Ms. Griffith is unable to be here, but it is being presented on her behalf. So please do enjoy, and again, take notes of any questions you may have. So Dr. Roach, you can go ahead.
Hi.
Okay, so let's just be a little patient, and we'll see what's happening here in terms of sharing this presentation, because there was no previous attempts, there was no previous practice to see, a test run to see if it would have opened and so on. So while Dr. Ruth works on that, again, it's lovely seeing people who have come back. I was on a bit yesterday, and I'm seeing similar faces a little bit yesterday. And so it's good to know that the interest is there. And I'm seeing Dr. Kumar Mahabir and Dr. David Davidine, who are also hosting a joint program of this together with the ICC on Sunday. Dr. Roth, feel free to, yes, go ahead, ma'am. I'm seeing your hand up.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that every time I try to share it, all she's saying is, I am Ingrid Griffith. My name is Ingrid Griffith. And then it cuts out. So I don't know. I think it's some kind of interference, but at this point in time, if we could try to find her again.
Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Ruth. So what we will do, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you a little bit about Ms. Griffith, and the video, when it's been finalized and everything has been worked out, will be posted by the GIHR when the other recording is published, right? So in all fairness, let's hear a little bit about Ms. Griffith, and then we will go on to the question and answer segment if there are any questions. So Ms. Griffith is a writer and performer, and she would have done the one-man show Unbossed and Unbowed, a story inspired by the life of the 20th century icon and social justice activist Shirley Anita St. Hill Chisholm. She would have said that I have been moved to write and share Shirley Chisholm's story in the hope that more people will become aware of her contributions, appreciate how her voice resonates today, and be inspired to get involved in some small way to bring about positive change in their community. So when everything is put in place and added, you all will see the pre-recorded video presentation that Ms. Ingrid would have done. So ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our presentations. Do we have any questions? Okay. I am not seeing any hands up. What I have, just one question, one simple, brief question for Ms. Marina. Ms. Marina, when you show the statistics for Paramaribo and so on, having a greater proportion of women, and you highlighted the two smaller one where there's this really great distinction. Is it because possibly it's rural versus urban districts, or what would account for that distinction?
It could also be rural and urban, but I don't know for sure. But it could also have to do with an higher education, women attaining a higher education. It can also be traditional roles. But I would like to investigate further on that matter. But it's a very valid point.
Okay. And okay, so thank you very much. And Dr. Algoe, what do you see happening with politics in Suriname, given what's happening in Guyana with the oil boom and so on? Do you see a ripple kind of effect happening there?
You want an honest answer?
Honest.
Marina is laughing as well. we are crossing our fingers. There are many things intersecting our cultural space, our way of thinking, our mental space, and also our resilience at this moment. And oil and gas exploration doesn't really improve that by definition. So first thing is that I find that the role of social media, where everyone can write anything about what they feel about each other or what they think of processes, without any consideration of what it may create as a spin-off, is actually messing up the cultural resilience of the country. So that's the first observation. The second one is that in the rush of more financial gains, whether it is to gas and oil or gold, we see that there's a growing disrespect for our ecology. So you get more issues related to climate change in the hinterland, destructing at the same time the traditional communities, the tribal societies. You get a change in the culture, but also with respect to the authorities, the influence of the traditional authorities, and finally. There are more questions about our democratic principles. I mean, the political parties are run by elites, and I think that's also a discussion in the region. You know, the political parties are run by elites, And young people actually are trying to look at them, or are looking at them as role models, while the whole structure, the whole political party structure is not based on democratic principles. So we can raise questions about our democratic practices. And I'll be honest, I am not that optimistic about what will happen to our country. It will only our hopes are more in the power of young people who are able to work as professionals, to keep an open mind and be aware of the loopholes in our politics, in our digital communication, and also the worldwide influences. Think about the political polarization globally, the legalization of abortion. I mean, those things, they don't make sense in 2022. So
yes,
my
okay.
reflection.
So a lovely contribution there as an addendum to what you would have shared already. So ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this session. I would like to thank you for your patience and your loyalty in terms of rejoining us and staying here. And I hope you all have an enjoyable rest of the program, which comes to an end today. So I am Bindhu Maharaj from Trinidad, and now I pass you on over back to our moderator.